The clock stopped at 2:17 in the morning. Not slowed, not delayed. It stopped completely. At that exact second, a Bitcoin transfer appeared on the network. No before, no after. The same instant. 1 second holding to events that should never share the same space. A mechanical clock frozen in silence, and a digital system moving with perfect precision. How does something built on endless motion act at the exact moment time itself refuses to move? Was it coincidence? Or was it a moment where two worlds touched without permission? The network recorded it calmly. No alarm, no warning. Just a transfer stamped forever into history. And the clock never ticked again. Think about that. A system powered by time, responding at the only moment time failed. What would it take for that to happen? Who would need to be there? And what would they need to hide? Before we go any further, subscribe to this channel if you are drawn to stories that live in the space between technology and human emotion. Like this video because it helps these stories reach others who feel the same pull. And comment below with your country and city so we can see how far this moment traveled. Now listen carefully, because this is not a story about code or money. This is a story about people, about fear, about choices made quietly, and about 1 second that refused to pass. Daniel never considered himself reckless. He worked a normal job at a small logistics company on the edge of town. He paid his bills late but always paid them. He lived with his wife Elena in a modest apartment above a closed bakery. The walls were thin. The heating worked only when it wanted to. And every month felt like a calculation that never quite balanced. They were not unhappy, but they were always tense, always watching numbers, always afraid of the next unexpected expense. Daniel hated that feeling more than anything, the feeling of waiting for something to go wrong. Elena carried that fear differently. She planned. She clipped coupons. She made lists. She believed stability came from control. Daniel believed stability came from escape. He never said that out loud, but it lived inside him, quietly growing. It started small. A conversation with a co-worker during lunch. A story about someone who bought Bitcoin years ago and never touched it again. Someone who checked their account one day and realized their entire life had changed. Daniel laughed it off at first, but the idea stayed with him. The idea that there was a way out that did not involve asking permission. No banks, no bosses, no explanations, just numbers moving silently from one place to another. He did not tell Elena, not because he wanted to lie, but because he was afraid she would say no. And once she said no, the door would close forever. The first time Daniel bought Bitcoin, it was late at night. Elena was asleep in the next room. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator. He sat at the kitchen table staring at his phone with shaking hands. It was not a large amount, just enough to feel like a secret, enough to feel like a promise. When the transaction completed, he felt something he had not felt in years. Relief, not joy, not excitement, relief. As if he had placed a small part of his future somewhere safer than his own life. Over the months that followed, Daniel added a little more. Not enough to be noticed, not enough to change anything immediately, but enough to matter to him. He watched the numbers move up and down. He learned to sit with the anxiety. He learned to hide his expressions. Elena noticed he was quieter, more distant. She asked if everything was okay. He said yes. And that was the moment the distance began to grow, not because of the money, but because of the silence around it. The clock came from Daniel's father, a heavy mechanical piece that had sat in his childhood home for decades. When his father passed, the clock stopped working properly. It would freeze at random times, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. Daniel took it anyway. He liked the weight of it, the sound. The idea that something old could still mark time, even if it struggled. He mounted it on the wall above his desk. He never fixed it. Part of him liked that it failed. On the night everything changed, Daniel was alone. Elena had gone to stay with her sister after an argument that felt small but heavy. Money again. Always money. The apartment felt hollow without her presence. Daniel sat at his desk staring at the clock. It was ticking unevenly. He checked the time on his phone, then on his computer. Everything matched, until it did not. At 2:17 the clock froze. The second hand stopped mid-motion. Daniel noticed immediately. He leaned forward, and at that exact second his phone vibrated softly on the desk. A Bitcoin transfer notification. Confirmed. Completed. Timestamped at 2:17. Daniel stared at the screen confused. He had not touched his wallet. He had not planned to move anything. His hands hovered above the desk as if the wrong movement might break something. He checked again. Same result, same time. He looked back at the clock. Still frozen. The room felt suddenly smaller, quieter, as if the air itself was waiting. Daniel told himself there was a simple explanation. There had to be. But even as the thought formed, he felt something deeper begin to twist inside him. Because he knew something was wrong. And he also knew this was only the beginning. Daniel did not sleep after that. He sat at the desk until the light outside began to change. The clock remained frozen at 2:17. He unplugged it. He tapped the glass. Nothing moved. He checked his phone again and again. The transaction was real, final. There was no undo. What troubled him was not the transfer itself. It was the timing. He replayed the moment in his head like a loop he could not stop. The stillness, the vibration, the feeling that the room had been holding its breath. By morning he convinced himself it was a coincidence. A strange one, but still a coincidence. He needed to believe that. When Elena returned the next day, she noticed the clock immediately. She always did. She asked why it was stopped again. Daniel shrugged and said it was old. She asked if he planned to fix it. He said maybe. The answer felt heavier than it should have. Elena watched him closely. She had learned to notice changes in tone. The way his eyes avoided hers. The way he paused before answering simple questions. She asked how much money they had left for the month. Daniel answered without lying. But he did not tell the whole truth either. And that space between what was said and what was hidden grew wider. Days passed. The transfer stayed where it was. Daniel told himself he would not touch it again. He promised himself this was the last secret. But every time he looked at the frozen clock, he felt a pull. As if that second had not finished yet. As if something was still waiting to happen. He began checking timestamps obsessively. On his phone. On public records. On anything that recorded time. He noticed small inconsistencies. Tiny delays. Nothing dramatic. But enough to make him uneasy. The world no longer felt perfectly aligned. It felt slightly off. Like a picture hung just a little too low. Elena sensed the shift before Daniel understood it himself. He was distant. Easily startled. He woke up at night staring at the ceiling. When she asked what he was thinking about, he said nothing. That answer hurt her more than anger would have. She began to feel like there was something else in the room with them. Not a person. A decision. Something Daniel had already made without her. She started checking their shared expenses more carefully. Looking for changes, patterns, gaps. One evening while Daniel showered, Elena sat at the kitchen table with his phone charging nearby. She did not plan to look. She told herself that. But the screen lit up with a notification. A balance update. Her heart tightened. She had heard enough stories. She unlocked the phone without thinking. What she saw was not what she expected. The amount was not huge, but it was hidden, separate, quiet. She felt a mix of relief and betrayal. Relief that he had not ruined them. Betrayal that he had not trusted her. She put the phone back exactly where it was and sat very still. That night Elena did not say anything. She watched Daniel carefully. The way he avoided the clock. The way he flinched when it caught his eye. She noticed how often he checked the time. How his fingers trembled slightly when he held his phone. She wondered how long he had been doing this alone. She wondered why. More than anything, she wondered what had happened at 2:17. Because she could feel that moment sitting between them like an unspoken sentence. Daniel felt her silence. It pressed against him harder than words would have. He wanted to tell her everything. He opened his mouth more than once and closed it again. He could not explain the feeling. That the transfer was wrong. That the timing mattered. That it felt like something had been marked. He feared that if he spoke it out loud it would become real. So he stayed quiet. And in that quiet the distance deepened. A week later the clock started ticking again. Just once, a single movement of the second hand. Then it froze again at the same place. Daniel heard it from across the room. His chest tightened. Elena heard it too. They both looked at the wall. Neither spoke. The sound faded. The second hand stopped exactly where it had before. Daniel felt cold spread through him. This was not coincidence anymore. This was repetition, and repetition meant intention. That night, Daniel checked the transaction history again. There was something he had missed, a detail so small he had overlooked it before. The transfer was linked to a block recorded with a timestamp that did not align cleanly with the network average, a fraction of a second. Almost nothing, but enough to suggest that something had slipped. Something had occurred between moments. Daniel closed the screen slowly. His reflection stared back at him in the dark glass. He realized then that whatever had happened at 2:17 was not finished. It was waiting. Elena lay awake listening to Daniel breathe beside her. She decided she would not confront him yet. Not until she understood more. Not until she knew whether the secret he carried was protecting them or endangering them. She reached out and placed her hand gently on the mattress between them. She whispered his name softly. He did not answer. At that moment, Elena made a choice of her own. She would watch. She would wait. And she would not look away again. The next morning, Daniel received a message that made his stomach drop. Not a notification. Not a warning. Just a simple system update showing a pending adjustment related to the same timestamp. 2:17. The same frozen second. His hands began to shake. He realized with sudden clarity that the transfer was not an ending. It was a trigger, and somewhere inside the silence of that frozen moment something else had already been set in motion. Daniel read the message again and again until the words lost their shape. Pending adjustment. No explanation. No amount. Just the same timestamp repeating like a quiet accusation. 2:17. He sat at the edge of the bed holding the phone with both hands. He felt foolish for feeling afraid of numbers, but fear does not ask permission. It arrives when something familiar stops behaving the way it should. He checked the clock on the wall, still frozen. He checked the time on his phone, moving forward without hesitation. Two versions of reality sharing the same room. Daniel felt like he was standing between them. He went to work that day but could not focus. He stared at spreadsheets without seeing them. Every sound made him flinch. A printer starting, a door closing, a phone vibrating across the room. Time felt strange, too fast and too slow at once. He checked the hour constantly, waiting for 2:17 to come again, dreading it, wanting it. When the minute passed without incident, he felt a strange disappointment, as if something important had failed to arrive. That night, Daniel finally told himself the truth. He had not just bought Bitcoin to escape his financial fear. He had bought it because he wanted control over time, not literally, but emotionally. He wanted to believe that decisions made quietly could protect the future, that one smart move at the right moment could change everything. The frozen clock felt like proof that moments mattered more than effort, that a single second could outweigh years of struggle. And now that second had marked him. Elena watched him from across the room. She noticed the way he stared at the wall where the clock hung, the way his jaw tightened whenever his phone vibrated. She felt anger rising, but it was tangled with concern. Daniel looked smaller somehow, like someone carrying a weight too heavy for them. She asked him directly if there was something he wanted to tell her. He hesitated. Too long. And that hesitation answered the question for her. That night after Daniel fell asleep, Elena returned to the kitchen table with his phone. She did not feel proud of what she was about to do, but she felt justified. She scrolled carefully. Slowly, she found the transaction history, the timestamp, the amount, the repetition of that frozen second. She did not understand everything she was seeing, but she understood enough. Daniel had moved money without telling her, and something about that moment did not make sense. She checked the date. Then she checked the time again, 2:17. She looked up at the clock on the wall, still frozen. Her skin prickled. Elena felt a chill settle into her chest. She remembered that night clearly. The argument, the silence, the way the apartment had felt empty when she left. She remembered waking up suddenly at her sister's place just after 2 in the morning with an unshakable feeling that something had shifted. At the time she dismissed it. Now the memory returned sharper. She realized that whatever had happened at 2:17 had touched both of them, even if only one of them knew it. The next day, Elena began to watch patterns. She noted the moments when Daniel seemed most tense. She noticed how often he checked the time when the minute hand approached 17. She noticed that his fear did not spike randomly. It rose in anticipation, as if he was waiting for something to repeat. She asked him gently why the clock was still broken. He snapped that he would fix it, then immediately apologized. Elena nodded, but inside she made a decision. She would find out what really happened at that second, even if Daniel would not tell her. Daniel returned home early one afternoon to find the clock gone. The space on the wall was empty, just a lighter rectangle where it had hung for years. His heart began to race. Elena stood in the doorway holding it carefully. She said she wanted to get it fixed. Daniel told her to stop. His voice came out sharper than he intended. Elena froze. She looked at him confused and hurt. Daniel realized late that his reaction had revealed everything. The clock mattered. Too much. Elena placed it gently on the table and stepped back. She asked him why he was afraid of it. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The room felt tight, the silence thick. He wanted to explain. He wanted to say it was nothing. But he could still see the timestamp burned into his mind. He could still feel the vibration of his phone at that exact second. He whispered that something happened when the clock stopped. Elena did not interrupt him. She just listened, and that terrified him more than anger ever could. Daniel told her about the transfer, about the timing, about the message that followed. He did not exaggerate. He did not dramatize. He spoke quietly, carefully. Elena listened with her arms crossed, not defensively, protectively. When he finished, she did not respond right away. She walked to the window and stared out at the street below. Cars passed, people moved, time flowed without concern for their fear. She finally turned back and said one sentence that changed everything. She said maybe the clock did not stop by accident. Daniel felt the weight of her words settle deep inside him. He realized that the secret he had been carrying was no longer his alone. Whatever had been triggered at 17 had now reached Elena, and once shared it could not be contained again. The clock sat silent on the table between them. The frozen second felt closer than ever, and somewhere beyond their apartment walls time continued moving forward, as if nothing had happened at all. The days that followed felt stretched thin, like fabric pulled too far. Daniel and Elena moved around each other carefully. As if the wrong step might tear something open they could not close again. They spoke about groceries, about work, about small things that did not matter. They did not speak about the clock. They did not speak about 17, but the silence around it grew louder with every passing hour. Daniel felt watched by time itself. Every minute felt heavier as it approached 17. Elena could not let it go. She tried. She told herself that old objects break, that coincidences happen, that fear can shape meaning where none exists. But she had seen Daniel's face when the clock froze. She had heard the tremor in his voice. She had felt the weight of that second pressing into her own chest. One afternoon, while Daniel was at work, she took the clock out of the drawer. She set it on the table and stared at it for a long time. It was heavy, solid, ordinary, and yet it felt like a door that should not be opened. She wound it carefully. She placed fresh batteries inside. She waited. Nothing happened. The second hand did not move. The clock remained fixed at 17. Elena felt a chill crawl up her arms. She tapped the glass lightly. Still nothing. She checked the time on her phone, moving forward without pause. She checked the wall clock in the kitchen, ticking normally. Only this one object refused to continue. It felt intentional, personal. That night Elena told Daniel what she had done. He did not yell. He did not panic. He just sat down slowly as if his legs had lost strength. He asked her not to touch it again. His voice was quiet but firm. Elena asked why. Daniel could not answer. Not because he did not want to, but because he did not know how. He only knew that something about forcing the clock to move felt dangerous, as if the frozen second was holding something in place. Elena began to notice other things, small things. The lights flickered briefly one evening at exactly 17. The radio cut to silence for a heartbeat before returning. Daniel dropped a glass at that minute, and it shattered on the floor. Each time Daniel froze. Each time Elena felt her stomach tighten. None of these moments were dramatic on their own, but together they formed a pattern, a quiet rhythm that repeated with unsettling consistency. Daniel stopped adding to the wallet. He promised Elena he would not move anything. He wanted to believe that leaving it alone would keep whatever had started from continuing. But the pending adjustment message remained, unresolved, waiting. It sat like a reminder that something had not finished. Elena asked what would happen if it did. Daniel did not know. That answer frightened them both. One night Daniel woke suddenly just before 17. His heart was racing. He checked the time. 2 minutes left. He lay still listening to Elena breathe beside him. He felt like a child waiting for thunder. When the minute arrived, nothing happened. No vibration, no sound. He exhaled in relief. But then Elena stirred and whispered his name. She said she had been dreaming. She said the clock was ticking in her dream and then stopped again. Daniel did not sleep after that. Elena began researching on her own. Not for explanations, for reassurance. She searched stories of strange coincidences, of objects freezing, of moments aligning to perfectly. She found comfort in reading that others had felt similar fear and survived it. But one thing stood out. The people who tried to force meaning onto the moment made it worse. The ones who accepted the uncertainty learned to live with it. Elena wondered which path Daniel was on. The pending adjustment message changed again 3 days later. Still no details, just a status update. Approaching resolution. Daniel felt sick when he read it. He realized that whatever had been triggered was moving closer to completion, whether he wanted it to or not. He thought about undoing everything, about selling, about closing the wallet. But something stopped him. A sense that acting now would be like pulling on a thread that held more than money together. Elena confronted him that evening. She asked if the wallet was more important than their marriage. Daniel said no without hesitation. But his eyes betrayed him. He was afraid. Afraid that whatever he chose would cause harm. Afraid that choosing wrong would lock them into consequences he could not predict. Elena felt tears well up, but she did not cry. She asked him one final question. She asked if he believed the moment meant something. Daniel did not answer right away. Then he nodded. That was when Elena understood the depth of it. This was not about money. It was about belief. Daniel believed that second mattered. That belief had power, and power carries responsibility. Elena asked him to promise her one thing, that if the moment came again he would not face it alone. Daniel agreed. He reached for her hand and held it tightly. The clock sat silent in the drawer nearby, waiting. The next morning Daniel received another notification. Not from the wallet, from the system itself. A scheduled confirmation tied to the original timestamp, set to complete the following night. At 2:17, the same frozen second. Daniel felt the room tilt slightly as he read it. The moment was coming back, and this time it would not pass quietly. He showed Elena the message without speaking. She read it once, then again. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and resolve. She said they would face it together. Daniel nodded, but deep inside he felt the same cold certainty settle in his chest. Whatever happened at 2:17 the next night would change something between them, something permanent, and there would be no way to rewind the clock. The day moved slowly toward night, each are dragging behind it like a weight. Daniel and Elena did not leave the apartment. They did not turn on the television. They spoke only when necessary. The knowledge of what was coming pressed into every quiet moment. Time felt different when you knew exactly when something would happen. It stopped being a background presence and became an approaching figure you could not avoid. As the evening deepened, Daniel checked the clock on his phone again and again. Each minute felt louder than the last. Elena sat on the couch watching him, memorizing his movements. She wondered if this was what fear looked like when it had nowhere to run. Not panic, not chaos, just a narrowing of focus. A mind trapped inside a single second that had not happened yet. At 1:30 in the morning, Daniel opened the drawer and took out the clock. He set it on the table between them. It was still frozen at 2:17. He did not touch it. He just looked at it as if it were something alive. Elena reached across the table and placed her hand gently on his. Her touch grounded him for a moment. He squeezed her fingers as if afraid she might disappear. At 2:15, the room felt unbearably still. No traffic outside. No voices from neighboring apartments. Even the refrigerator seemed quieter. Daniel's heart began to pound. Elena felt it when she leaned against him. She whispered that whatever happened they would deal with it together. Daniel nodded but did not trust his voice enough to answer. 2:16 arrived. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. His phone lay face up on the table. The clock stared back at them with its unmoving hands. Elena counted Daniel's breaths. 1, 2, 3. The air felt thick, as if it were resisting the next moment. At 2:17 everything stopped. Not just the clock, not just the room. Daniel felt as if his own thoughts froze mid-motion. His phone vibrated once, softly. The sound felt enormous in the silence. Elena gasped quietly. Daniel stared at the screen. A confirmation. The pending adjustment completed. Finalized. Timestamped at 2:17. The clock ticked. Just once, the second hand moved forward. One small click. Then it stopped again. Still at 2:17. Daniel felt tears burn behind his eyes. Elena covered her mouth with her hand. The sound had been real. They had both heard it. This time there was no denial left. Daniel checked the wallet with shaking hands. The balance had changed. Not dramatically, but clearly. The numbers were different than before. Something had resolved. Something had finished. The message that had haunted him for days was gone, replaced by a quiet finality. Daniel felt a strange mix of relief and dread. The waiting was over, but the meaning remained. Elena looked at him and asked the question neither of them had said out loud. She asked what he thought it meant. Daniel did not answer right away. He stared at the clock, at the frozen second that had now repeated itself twice. He whispered that it felt like the moment had closed, like a door that had been held open finally shutting. Elena felt anger rise suddenly. Not wild, focused. She asked if he believed the money had caused this, or if this had always been waiting to happen. Daniel shook his head slowly. He said he did not think the Bitcoin caused anything. He thought it was a witness. Elena felt a chill. A witness to what? Daniel tried to explain the feeling that had been growing inside him since the first night, that he felt chosen, not special, not lucky, just positioned, that his quiet decision to hide something had lined up with something else that already existed. Elena listened, but her heart ached. She heard not certainty but guilt. A guilt that had been growing long before the clock ever stopped. Elena asked him a question that cut deeper than he expected. She asked if he would have told her if the moment had never happened. Daniel closed his eyes. The answer came without effort. No, he would not have. The truth hung between them heavier than the clock ever had. Silence filled the room again. Not tense, sad. Elena stood and walked to the window. She looked out at the street below where time moved forward without pause. People passed under streetlights, unaware of frozen seconds and closed moments. She realized then that whatever meaning Daniel had attached to the 17 did not belong to the world. It belonged to him. Elena turned back and said something quietly. She said the moment did not choose him. He chose it, by hiding, by waiting, by believing that 1 second could save him from facing his fears. Daniel felt the weight of her words settle deep inside his chest. He realized she was right. The frozen second had not created the distance between them. It had revealed it. Daniel felt something shift inside him. A release, not of fear, of responsibility. He told Elena he was done hiding. He said the money did not matter anymore. That if the moment meant anything, it was showing him the cost of silence. Elena listened carefully. She wanted to believe him. But belief now required action. The clock sat silent on the table. The phone lay dark beside it. Time resumed its normal pace outside their apartment, but inside something fundamental had changed. Daniel realized the moment had not frozen time to trap him. It had frozen it to force him to look. Elena picked up the clock and held it carefully. She asked what he wanted to do with it. Daniel stared at it for a long moment. He felt the urge to smash it, to throw it away, to erase the symbol of everything that had happened. But another thought rose instead. He said he wanted to fix it. Not hide it, not fear it, fix it. Elena nodded slowly. She said that fixing things meant facing how they broke. Daniel understood. The night was not over yet. The consequences of 217 were still unfolding, and the hardest part had not arrived yet. Daniel reached for his phone and opened the wallet again, not to check the balance, but to make a choice. Elena watched him carefully. She did not know what he was about to do, only that whatever it was would decide whether the frozen moment became a warning or a wound that never healed. Daniel did not rush. For the first time since the clock stopped, he allowed himself to breathe before acting. His phone felt heavier in his hand than it ever had before. Elena watched him closely, not to control him, but to understand who he would choose to be next. Daniel scrolled slowly and stopped. He was not looking at numbers anymore. He was looking at proof of his own fear, proof of how long he had believed that silence was safer than honesty. He told Elena he was going to move the Bitcoin, not to hide it, not to protect it from her, but to place it where there were no secrets left. He said he wanted the money to exist in the open, even if it lost value, even if it changed nothing. Elena did not stop him. She nodded once. That nod carried relief and grief at the same time. Relief that the secret was ending, grief for how long it had existed. Daniel initiated the transfer carefully. He did not look at the clock. He did not look at the time. He refused to let the frozen second decide anything else for him. The phone confirmed the action quietly. No vibration this time. No strange timing. Just movement. Normal. Uneventful. And that was when Daniel realized something important. The moment had power only while he believed it did. Elena felt the shift too. The room felt lighter. Not calm, but honest. She walked to the table and picked up the clock again. She turned it over in her hands, studied the worn edges, the scratches left by years of use. She said she would take it to be repaired the next day. Daniel agreed, not because he thought it would fix anything, but because facing broken things was better than pretending they did not exist. When morning came, the clock was still frozen, but Daniel was not afraid of it anymore. He made coffee. He opened the window. The city woke up around them. Life continued without acknowledging frozen seconds or strange coincidences. Daniel realized that whatever had happened at 17 did not belong to the network. It belonged to his choices. Elena asked him one final question before they left the apartment. She asked if he still believed the moment meant something. Daniel thought carefully. He said yes, but not the way he had before. He said it meant that waiting too long to be honest can trap you inside a single second forever. Elena nodded. She understood that answer. The clock was repaired a week later. When it returned, the second hand moved smoothly past 2:17 without hesitation. Daniel watched it closely the first time it crossed that point. Nothing happened. No vibration. No sound. No sign. Just time doing what it always does, moving forward without explanation. Daniel felt a quiet release. The moment no longer owned him. They never told anyone else the story. Not because it was unbelievable, but because it was deeply personal. The truth did not need witnesses, only understanding. The Bitcoin moved when it moved. The clock stopped when it stopped. And life continued around those facts without offering answers. Sometimes Daniel still checks the time at 17 without realizing it. Old habits fade slowly, but now when the minute passes he feels nothing. No fear, no anticipation. Just another moment among many. He learned that the danger was never the second itself. It was the meaning he placed inside it. Elena watches him sometimes when he does not know it. She sees a man who finally understands that protection does not come from secrecy. It comes from shared weight, from choosing to face uncertainty together instead of hiding inside it alone. And that is the question this story leaves behind. Was the moment at 2:17 a coincidence, or did it exist to expose something that already needed to be seen? Did time freeze to warn him, or did it simply reveal how fragile control can be when fear makes the decisions? Maybe the real danger is not when time stops, but when we convince ourselves that one moment can save us from doing the hard work of honesty. And maybe the only way time truly moves forward is when we stop waiting for signs and start making choices. If this story made you pause, if it made you think about moments in your own life that feel frozen, ask yourself what they are protecting you from facing, and what might happen if you finally let them pass. Thank you for watching this video.